The betrayal didn't sound like a villain's speech. It sounded like my father's voice on a crackling speakerphone, calm and practical. He told me my brother needed a charter boat more than my daughter needed her operation. He called it an investment. I looked at Lila, just 7 years old, coloring at the kitchen table, and realized the people who were supposed to be our safety net had just cut the ropes. The letter from the insurance company arrived on a Tuesday, sandwiched between a coupon for tire rotation and a pre-approved credit card offer. The envelope was thin. Good news usually came in thick packets, full of brochures and welcome guides. Bad news came on single sheets of paper, tri-folded with mechanical precision. I stood in the kitchen of my rental apartment, still wearing my vest from the lunch shift at the diner, staring at the bold text in the center of the page. Denied, not medically necessary. My daughter, Lila, was 7 years old. She was sitting 3 feet away from me at the wobbly circular table where we ate our meals, drawing a picture of a cat with purple wings. She did not look sick. That was the problem. That was the loophole the insurance adjusters had found. To them, her condition was a structural anomaly, something that could wait because she was not currently dying. They did not see the way her stamina crashed after 20 minutes of play. They did not see the nights she woke up crying because her legs ached from poor circulation. They did not hear the surgeon at Crescent Bay Children's Hospital tell me that if we waited another year, the curvature would become permanent, and the recovery time would double. I dropped the letter onto the counter. The clock on the microwave flashed 4:30 in the afternoon. I had exactly 90 minutes before I had to log in for my remote transcription job, my second income stream that kept us floating just above the poverty line. I needed $4,000 for the deposit. The total out-of-pocket cost would be higher, but the $4,000 was the gatekeeper. Without it, they would not book the operating room. I picked up my phone and dialed my mother. Marianne Ross answered on the second ring, her voice bright and airy, the sound of someone whose biggest stress was choosing between floral arrangements for the church altar. "Ariana," she said, "I was just thinking about you. Your father and I are looking at cruise brochures for the fall." I closed my eyes and leaned against the refrigerator. It was humming loud and erratic, a reminder that I needed to call the landlord about the compressor. "Mom," I said, "I need to come over, tonight." Something in my voice must have cut through the cruise talk because she paused. "Is everything all right? Is it Lila?" "It is about the surgery." I said, "I got the letter from the insurance." There was a silence on the line, the kind that usually preceded a change of subject. My parents, Gordon and Marianne, did not like bad news. They preferred a version of reality where hard work was always rewarded and misfortune was a result of poor planning. "Come for dinner on Sunday instead," she said. "Your brother is coming. We can talk then. I cannot wait until Sunday." "Mom, I need to put the deposit down next week or we lose the date." "Sunday." "Ariana," she said firmly, "we are having roast beef. Bring Lila." I hung up, looking at the drawing of the purple-winged cat. Lila looked up at me, her eyes wide and perceptive. "Is Grandma mad?" she asked. "No, baby," I said, forcing a smile that felt tight on my face. "Grandma just wants to feed us roast beef." I spent the next 4 days working myself into a state of numb exhaustion. I took extra shifts at the diner. I typed until my fingers cramped during the nights. I called the insurance company 3 times, navigating endless automated menus, only to be told by a polite voice that the appeal process was available but slow. But I had a backup plan. I had the Ross Family Emergency Fund. Growing up, it was a legend in our house. My father, Gordon, a man who prided himself on financial literacy and prudent investments, had always preached the importance of liquidity. "Money is freedom. Ariana," he would say, "we keep a fund for the real crises, for health, for tragedy, so we never have to beg." They had used it when my aunt's house flooded. They had used it when my father needed unexpected dental implants. It was a point of pride. I had never asked for a dime of it, not even when my divorce from Caleb left me scrambling for a security deposit on this apartment. I had handled that myself. I had handled everything myself. But this was for Lila. This was exactly what the fund was for. Sunday arrived with gray skies and a humidity that made my hair frizz. I dressed Lila in her best dress, the blue one with the white collar, because appearances mattered to Gordon and Marianne. I wore slacks and a blouse, trying to look like a woman who was managing, not a daughter who was drowning. Their house was in the older, wealthier part of Harbor Ridge, where the driveways were paved with brick and the lawns were manicured by professionals. I parked my 10-year-old sedan behind my father's pristine truck. My brother Ethan's car was already there. It was a new sports coupe, leased, gleaming black in the dull light. Ethan was 35, 2 years older than me, and he moved through the world with the confidence of someone who had never truly faced a consequence. He was sitting on the patio when we walked in, nursing a craft beer. "Hey, Ari," he said, not standing up. "Hey, little bit." Lila ran to give him a hug. Ethan was fun. He was the uncle who bought loud toys and taught her bad jokes. He was also the uncle who borrowed $20 from me at Christmas and forgot to pay it back. Inside, the house smelled of rosemary and garlic. My mother was in the kitchen, wiping down a counter that was already spotless. "There you are," she said. "Dad is in the study. Go say hello." I walked down the hallway, the carpet plush under my feet. The door to the study was ajar. I could hear my father's voice. He was on the phone. But he must have had it on speaker. Or perhaps his hearing was going and he had the volume turned up high. "It is a done deal," Gordon said. "The bank cleared the transfer this morning." I stopped. I knew I should announce myself, but desperation made me pause. If he was talking about money, I needed to know the mood. A man's voice crackled back. "Excellent. We can have the papers ready by Tuesday. You are going to love the twin outboards. Gordon, she handles like a dream in the chop. It is not for me." My father laughed. "It is for the boy. He needs a leg up, a business of his own." I felt a cold prickle start at the base of my neck. "It is a big investment," the salesman said. "Families invest in the future," Gordon said. "That is what we do." "But what about the other thing?" Ethan asked from the doorway behind me. I spun around. Ethan wasn't on the patio. He had followed me in. Silent in his expensive sneakers, he was holding his phone, looking at me, but speaking to our father through the open door. "The surgery," Ethan said, staring right at me. "You said Ari needed help." My father's voice floated out of the room. Clear and dismissive. "We will handle it. Ariana will understand. The surgery can be moved. It is not life or death. The boat deal is time-sensitive." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The hallway stretched out, long and distorted. I pushed the door open. My father was sitting behind his mahogany desk, looking at a spreadsheet on his computer. He looked up, startled, his finger hovering over the mouse. "Ariana," he said, "I didn't hear you come in. You are buying a boat." I said. My voice sounded flat, strange to my own ears. Gordon took off his reading glasses. He did not look guilty. He looked annoyed, like he had been interrupted in the middle of important work. "It is a charter vessel," he corrected. "For Ethan. He is starting a business. Coastal tours, fishing trips. It is an income generator." I looked from him to Ethan, who was leaning against the doorframe now, crossing his arms. "I asked you for help on Tuesday. I said, I told you I needed the deposit for Lila. You told me you would check the accounts. And we did," Marianne said, appearing behind Ethan. She was wiping her hands on a dish towel. "We looked at everything. Honey, the market is down. Our liquidity is tight. You just said the bank cleared the transfer." I said, "I heard you. Twin outboards." Gordon sighed. A long, heavy sound that implied I was being unreasonable. "That is capital. Ariana, it is an investment. Ethan has been struggling to find his footing since the layout at the firm. This boat gives him a career. It gives him dignity." "Dignity?" I repeated. "My daughter needs surgery. Her spine is twisting. She can walk. Can she not?" Gordon asked. The question hung in the air. Brutal and practical. "Yes," I said. "She can walk, but it hurts her. And if we wait, the doctor says, doctors always push for the immediate." Gordon cut in. It is how they bill. We researched it. Ariana, the condition is stable. If you push the surgery to next year, we will have revenue coming in from the charter business. We can pay for the whole thing then. Cash, he smiled, as if he had just solved a complex puzzle. We are leveraging the capital to help everyone. He said, Ethan gets a start. You get the surgery paid for. It just requires a little patience. I looked at Ethan. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was inspecting a loose thread on his sleeve. You are okay with this? I asked him. You are taking a boat while your niece waits in pain? Ethan's head snapped up. Don't put that on me. Ari, it is a business loan. Dad is silent partner. I am going to pay it back. Like the condo down payment? I asked. Like the legal fees for the DUI? Ethan's face flushed red. That is ancient history. It is a pattern. I said, that is enough. Marianne snapped. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the tension. We are not going to ruin Sunday dinner with scorekeeping. We are making a strategic decision for the family. For the family, I whispered. I looked at them. My father, the patriarch who believed money was a tool for control. My mother, the peacemaker who kept the peace by burying the truth. My brother, the golden boy who never had to shine because they just painted him gold over and over again. I am not staying for dinner. I said, Ariana, do not be dramatic. My mother said. I walked past Ethan. I grabbed Lila's hand where she was standing by the entrance. Clutching her coloring book. We are leaving. Lila, but the roast beef? She asked, confused. We will get burgers, I said. I drove until my hands stopped shaking. I pulled into a beach access parking lot, the ocean gray and churning in the distance. Lila was in the back seat, eating chicken nuggets I had bought at a drive-thru. I gripped the steering wheel and let the memories flood in. It wasn't just today. It was the college fund that was drained to pay off Ethan's credit cards when he was 22. He made a mistake. Ariana, you have scholarships. You can work. It was the time I needed a co-signer for my first car, and they said it was too risky. Only to co-sign a lease for Ethan's luxury sedan a month later. They didn't hate me. That would have been easier. They just didn't see me. I was the sturdy one, the one who could take a hit and keep standing. Ethan was the fragile one, the one who needed constant propping up. And now, they were doing it to Lila. I looked in the rearview mirror. Lila was humming to herself, oblivious to the fact that her grandparents had just traded her health for a fiberglass hull and twin engines. I wiped my face. I could not afford to spiral. I had 3 weeks. On Monday morning, I sat across from Mrs. Halloway, the financial counselor at Crescent Bay Children's Hospital. Her office was a small, windowless room, painted a soothing shade of sage green. There was a box of tissues on the desk, right next to the credit card terminal. I have $3,200 saved. I said, I can pay that today. Can we work out a payment plan for the rest of the deposit? Mrs. Halloway looked at me with sympathetic eyes. She was an older woman with kind wrinkles, but her hands were tied by administrative red tape. I wish I could, Ms. Ross, but the policy changed last year for elective procedures, and insurance has coded this as elective. We require the full deposit 7 days prior to the surgery date. It is $4,000. I said, I am short $800, plus the estimated anesthesiology copay, she added gently, which is another $500. $4,500. I felt the air leave my lungs. If I cannot pay it? Then we have to release the surgical slot, she said. The surgeon's schedule is booked out 6 months. If you miss this window, the next opening is in February. February, 8 months away. 8 months of Lila waking up crying. 8 months of her spine twisting further. I will get it. I said, do not release the slot. I will get it. Mrs. Halloway nodded. You have until the Friday before the surgery. That is 18 days. I walked out of the hospital with a folder full of impossible numbers and a countdown clock ticking in my chest. I met Caleb at a park halfway between our apartments for the custody handoff. It was his night with Lila. Caleb Morrow was a good father. He was a decent man. He was also a man who lived paycheck to paycheck, working as a landscape architect for the city. We had divorced 3 years ago. It hadn't been explosive. It had been a slow erosion of intimacy, worn down by the stress of Lila's health and the constant, grinding pressure of never having enough money. He was waiting by the swing set, his boots muddy from work. "Hey," he said, "how did the appointment go?" I watched Lila run toward the slide. Insurance denied the appeal. I said, "And my parents?" "Well, the Bank of Gordon is closed." Caleb frowned. "What happened?" "I thought they were sitting on that emergency fund." "Ethan needs a boat," I said. Caleb let out a short, bitter laugh. "You are joking. I wish—" He kicked at the wood chips. "I picked up some overtime last week, and I can sell the dirt bike. It won't be much. Maybe 1,200? My pride flared, hot and sharp. I didn't want his money. I didn't want to owe him. When we split, I had made a vow to be independent. "I do not want you to sell your bike, Caleb. You love that thing. I love Lila more." He said simply, "Look, Ari, I know you. You want to fix this yourself. But this is big. Let me help with the paperwork at least. I can call the billing department, see if there are grants. I can take Lila an extra night this week so you can pick up shifts." I looked at him. His jaw was set, stubborn. He wasn't trying to win me back. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He was just being her dad. "Okay," I said. "You take the paperwork and the extra night, but keep the bike for now. I am going to try something else first." "What?" he asked. "I am going to ask the village." I said, that night, I sat at my laptop and opened a crowdfunding site. I stared at the blinking cursor for 10 minutes. Asking for money felt like undressing in public. It felt like admitting failure. Gordon's voice echoed in my head. Rosses do not beg, but Gordon wasn't paying for the surgery. So I typed, I didn't write a tragedy. I didn't write a sob story. I wrote the truth. "Hi everyone. As many of you know, my daughter Lila needs a surgery to correct a spinal issue. We have hit a snag with insurance, and we need to bridge the gap for the deposit to keep her surgery date. I am working hard to cover it, but the timeline is short. If you can help, Lila and I would be forever grateful. If not, your prayers and good vibes are just as valuable." I set the goal for $2,000, enough to cover the gap and the anesthesia, with a little buffer for the time I would have to take off work. I hit publish. I shared the link on my social media. Then I turned off my phone and went to sleep. When I woke up, I had $300. It was mostly small donations, $10 from a waitress at the diner, $20 from a mom at Lila's school, $50 from an old college roommate I hadn't spoken to in years. By Wednesday, it had grown to $800. People at my transcription job had shared it. It was gaining traction. I felt a tentative hope blooming in my chest. Then I saw the notification. One of my cousins, a well-meaning woman named Sarah, who lived 2 towns over, had shared the post. So proud of my cousin Ariana for fighting for her sweet girl. It is a shame when systems fail us. Let's help them out. At Gordon Ross at Marianne Ross, I know you guys must be so worried. She had tagged my parents. My stomach dropped. Within an hour, the dynamic shifted. I got a text from my mother. "Take it down. Now." I didn't reply. Then came the comments on the post. Not from my parents, but from their circle. "Is everything okay? Ariana? I saw your father at the club yesterday. He didn't mention any financial trouble. Praying for you. It is hard when you have to go it alone." And then, a comment from a username I didn't recognize, but the tone was familiar. "Maybe if you hadn't moved into that expensive apartment complex, you wouldn't need handouts. Families should handle things privately." My face burned. They were spinning it. They were making me look irresponsible to protect their image as the benevolent patriarch and matriarch. If I needed money, it must be because I was bad with it. Not because they had refused to help. I didn't take it down. I left it up. I pinned it to the top of my profile. I am doing this for Lila. I told myself, let them talk. Friday came. I was sitting at the diner counter, rolling silverware into napkins, when my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from the insurance company. I wiped my hands on my apron and opened it, hoping for a miracle. Maybe they had reviewed the file early. Maybe they had realized their mistake. Subject: Update on appeal. Case number 89902. Dear Mr. Ross, we have received your request for an expedited review. However, due to the volume of appeals and the requirement for additional external review of the imaging, the estimated processing time has been updated to 30 to 45 business days. I did the math instantly. 30 business days was 6 weeks. Lila's surgery was in 2 weeks. The system had failed. The appeal would not be done in time. The deposit deadline was next Friday. I looked at the crowdfunding total. $950. I was still thousands short. I put the phone down on the sticky counter. The noise of the diner, the clatter of plates, the hiss of the espresso machine, the chatter of customers, faded into a dull roar. I was done asking nicely. I was done waiting for permission. I picked up my phone again and dialed the number for the legal aid clinic I had seen on a flyer at the library. Ariana Ross. I thought, you are on your own. But as I looked at the picture of Lila on my lock screen, smiling with a gap-toothed grin, I knew that wasn't true. I wasn't on my own. I was on her side, and that made me dangerous. I clocked out of my shift, walked to my car, and started the engine. I wasn't going home. I was going to find a way to get that money, even if I had to tear down the family facade brick by brick to find it. But first, I had to survive the weekend. The email sat in my inbox like a sentence. 30 to 45 days. I put the car in gear. The time for waiting was over. I printed the spreadsheet at the library because my printer at home was out of black ink. The paper was warm in my hands. A single sheet that laid out my entire financial humiliation in 12-point font. I had calculated everything. My projected income from the transcription work, the tax refund I would get next April, and a strict austerity budget that cut our grocery spending by 30%. I drove to my parents' house on Tuesday evening. I did not bring Lila. I needed them to see me not as a mother begging for a favor, but as a grown woman proposing a business transaction. My father was in the garage, polishing the chrome bumper of his truck. He loved that truck more than he loved most people. It was tangible proof of his stability. Ariana, he said, not looking up from the rag. We already talked about this. I walked up the driveway, my heels clicking on the concrete. This is different, Dad. I am not asking for a gift. I am asking for a bridge loan. I held out the paper. He stopped polishing and looked at it, then wiped his hands on a shop towel before taking it. He scanned the columns, his brow furrowing. I have the repayment schedule right there, I said, pointing to the bottom row. I will pay you back the full $4,000 plus 5% interest over 18 months. That is a better return than a savings account. Marianne came out of the side door, drying her hands on an apron. She looked tired, her eyes rimmed with red. What is this? She asked. Ariana wants to borrow against the fund again, Gordon said, handing her the paper. With interest. It is a bridge loan. Mom, I said, just until the insurance appeal goes through or I can pick up enough extra shifts, if I don't pay the deposit by next Friday. Lila loses her spot. Marianne looked at the numbers, but I could tell she wasn't really seeing them. She was looking at the conflict they represented. Oh, honey, she said, her voice wobbling. You know we want to help. Then help. I said, it is a contract. We can notarize it. Gordon handed the paper back to me. It is not about the interest. Ariana, it is about liquidity. The money is tied up. Tied up in what? I asked. The boat? He stiffened. The boat is a business asset for your brother. We cannot liquidate it now without taking a loss. I am not asking you to sell the boat, I said, fighting to keep my voice even. I am asking you to use the rest of the emergency fund. The part you said was for crises. There is no rest. Gordon said sharply, the market has been hard on us too. Ariana, you think we are made of money? We have expenses, property taxes, insurance. You have a savings account for emergencies. I insisted. You have told us about it since we were kids. Marianne started to cry. It was a soft, practiced weeping that usually ended all arguments in our house. "Please don't make me choose," she sobbed into her hands. "I cannot choose between my children. Why are you doing this? Ariana, why are you making us the bad guys?" I stared at her. "I am not making you choose. Mom, I am asking you to prioritize a child's surgery over a grown man's hobby. It is his livelihood," she wailed. I looked at my father. He had turned back to his truck. The conversation over as far as he was concerned. "We can't do it. Ariana," he said to the bumper, "the answer is no." I walked back to my car. The spreadsheet crumpled in my fist. They weren't broke. I knew they weren't broke. They just didn't want to spend their money on my problems. I drove straight to Ethan's apartment complex. It was a nice place, with a pool and a gym, the kind of place you lived when you wanted to look successful but didn't want to build equity. Ethan answered the door in basketball shorts and a t-shirt that said, "Salt Life." He looked surprised to see me. "Ari? What's up?" "We need to talk," I said, pushing past him into the living room. His apartment was a shrine to arrested development. A massive television took up one wall. Empty craft beer cans lined the coffee table. There were no books, no papers, just gadgets and gear. "I need you to delay the boat purchase," I said without preamble. Ethan sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "Dad told me you might come by. Look, Ari, I can't. The seller has another offer. It is now or never. It is a boat. Ethan," I said, "it is not a kidney. Lila needs surgery." He walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge. "Do you want a water?" "No," I said. "I want you to tell Dad that you can wait 6 months. That is all. Just tell him to release the funds for the deposit, and you will buy the boat in the winter. Prices are better in the winter anyway." He cracked open a soda and leaned against the counter, giving me a look of pity that made my skin crawl. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't just a boat. It is a charter business. I have clients lined up. If I don't launch this season, I miss the summer rush. I lose momentum." "What clients?" I asked. "Who are they?" "People," he said vaguely. "Friends of friends." "Ethan," I said, stepping closer. "You are 35 years old. You have started 4 businesses in 10 years. The drone photography, the crypto mining, the custom sneaker restoration. None of them lasted 6 months. That is low." "Ari," he said, his face darkening. "Those were learning experiences. This is different. The water is my element. My daughter is in pain." I said, "Her spine is twisting inside her body, and you are talking about your element." He slammed the soda can down on the counter. Foam fizzed over his hand. "Stop weaponizing Lila," he shouted. The room went quiet. The accusation hung there, gross and heavy. "Weaponizing her?" I whispered. "You are using her to guilt-trip everyone," he said, his voice shaking with self-righteous anger. "You think because you have a kid with a sob story, the whole world has to stop turning. Well, I have a life too. Ariana, I have dreams too. Dad and Mom see that. Why can't you?" I looked at him. I really looked at him. I saw the fear behind the bluster. He knew he was a failure. He knew he was a sinkhole for our parents' money, and he hated me because I was the mirror that showed him what he really was. "You are right," I said quietly. "I do have a life, and I am going to save it." I walked out. When I got home, I didn't go to sleep. I opened my laptop. Ethan claimed he had a charter business. He claimed he had clients. He claimed this was a legitimate enterprise. I went to the Secretary of State's website. I searched for business filings under his name. Ethan Ross, Ross Charters, Harbor Ridge Marine, nothing. I searched for LLCs registered to his address. Nothing. I went to the Department of Natural Resources website to look up commercial charter licenses. There was a searchable database. I typed in his name. No results found. I sat back in my chair. To run a legal charter business in North Carolina, you needed a captain's license, commercial insurance, and a business registration. Ethan had none of these. He wasn't starting a business. He was buying a toy, and my parents were paying for it, calling it an investment to make themselves feel better about enabling him. My gut tightened. It wasn't just unfair. It was a lie. And if they were lying about the business, what else were they lying about? The next morning, I took a half-day off work to meet with Dr. Nina Hallberg at the hospital. She wasn't a doctor of medicine. She was a PhD in social work, a patient advocate who navigated the labyrinth of the American healthcare system for families who were drowning. She was a sharp woman with short gray hair and glasses that hung on a chain around her neck. Her office was cluttered with files, but her desk was clear. I explained the situation, the insurance denial, the lack of family support, the impending deadline. She listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. "Okay," she said when I finished. "Here is the reality. The insurance company is stalling. They do this because 70% of people give up after the first denial. We are not going to give up." She pulled a form from a drawer. "We are going to file for an expedited external review based on medical necessity. I will get the surgeon to write a letter stating that delay will cause irreversible harm." That is the key phrase. Irreversible harm. "Will it happen in 10 days? I asked. "Doctor." Hallberg looked at me over her glasses. "Honestly? Probably not. The external review board has its own timeline, but we need to start the paper trail now. If they deny it again and Lila suffers complications, you will have grounds for a lawsuit. That threat sometimes moves them faster. A lawsuit doesn't help me pay the deposit by Friday." I said, "No." She agreed. "It doesn't. But you need to protect yourself. Ariana, document everything, every phone call with insurance, every conversation with the billing department, every interaction with your family about finances." "Why my family?" I asked. "Because," she said, leaning forward, "in my experience, when families start talking about investments instead of medical care, money tends to move in ways that aren't transparent. If you are relying on promises, get them in writing. If they refuse, assume the money isn't there." I left her office feeling heavier, but clearer. Document everything. That afternoon, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. "It's Aunt Lorna. Call me when you are alone." Lorna Vale was my mother's sister. They hadn't spoken properly in 5 years, ever since a blow-up at Thanksgiving over a political argument that turned personal. Lorna was the family pariah, single, childless, and sharp-tongued. I called her from my car. "Ariana," she said. Her voice sounded like smoke and whiskey. "I saw your fundraiser." "Hi, Aunt Lorna. I sent $50. She said, "It is all I can do right now." "Thank you," I said, feeling a lump in my throat. "That means a lot." "Listen to me," she said. Her tone dropped, becoming urgent. "Do not count on Gordon and Marianne." "I know," I said. "They already said no. It is not just that they won't, Ariana. It is that they might not be able to." "What do you mean?" "Gordon has always played a shell game with money," she said. "He likes to look rich, but looking rich is expensive. When your grandmother died, there was supposed to be a trust for the grandkids. Did you ever see it?" "No," I said. "Dad said it was invested in long-term bonds." Lorna snorted. "Bonds? Right. All I know is that when I asked for an audit of the estate 3 years ago, he threatened to sue me for harassment. He is hiding something. Ariana, that emergency fund? I would bet my life it is empty, or it is leveraged to the hilt." The conversation with Ethan came back to me. The bank cleared the transfer. If the fund is empty, where is he getting the money for the boat? I asked. "That is the question." "Isn't it?" Lorna said. "Be careful, honey. When Gordon gets desperate, he gets creative, and he never uses his own name if he can use someone else's." I hung up, a cold feeling spreading through my chest. I went to the hospital billing office the next day to pay the $800 I had raised. It wasn't enough, but it was a show of good faith. I wanted them to know I was trying. The clerk was a young woman with bright pink fingernails. She typed my name into the system. "Ariana Ross," she said. "For Lila Ross." "Yes." She frowned at the screen. "Ms. Ross, I see a note here that you called yesterday to reschedule the surgery for October." I froze. "What?" She turned the monitor so I could see. There was a note in the system, time-stamped yesterday at 2:15 p.m. Mother called, stated funds are not available, requested to move procedure to fall, pending cancellation of current slot. I did not call. I said, my voice was trembling. I was at work at 2:15 p.m. The clerk looked confused. The note says, Mother. I am the mother. I said, I am the only mother. Who called? She clicked on the details. It says the caller verified the patient's date of birth and the last 4 digits of the Social Security number, the caller ID. She squinted. It is a local landline, ending in 4402. That was my parents' home number. My mother had called the hospital. She had impersonated me. She had tried to cancel my daughter's surgery behind my back. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to grip the counter. That was not me. I said, my voice hard. That was my mother. She does not have legal guardianship. She does not have power of attorney. Restoring that slot is imperative. Do not cancel it. The clerk looked alarmed. I will put a flag on the file. Password required for all changes. Yes, I said. Do that. I walked out of the hospital, my vision blurring with rage. It wasn't just negligence anymore. It was sabotage. They were actively trying to stop the surgery because the date conflicted with their financial timeline for the boat. I sat in my car and took a deep breath. Document everything. When Gordon gets desperate, he gets creative. I took out my phone and downloaded a credit monitoring app. I had never bothered with one before. My credit was average, boring, and static. I entered my Social Security number. I answered the security questions. The report generated in seconds. Score, 680. I scrolled down to the inquiries section. There was a hard inquiry from the apartment complex 3 years ago. A hard inquiry from the utility company. And then, under soft inquiries, Bayview Lending Services. Date, 3 days ago. I had never heard of Bayview Lending Services. I had certainly not applied for a loan with them. I scrolled further. Under open accounts, there was my student loan, my car loan, my credit card, and one more. First National Bank. Joint checking. Status, open. Balance, minus $214. I stared at it. That was the account my father had opened for me when I was 16. To teach me how to balance a checkbook. I had closed it when I got married. Or I thought I had. I had signed the papers. I had handed them to my father to drop off at the branch because he was going anyway. It was still open, and it was overdrawn. The address listed on the account was my parents' house. I drove to their house. I didn't call first. It was dinner time. They were eating lasagna. The smell of cheese and tomato sauce, usually comforting, made me want to retch. I walked into the dining room. I didn't sit down. Did you call the hospital and pretend to be me? I asked. Marianne dropped her fork. It clattered against the china. Gordon chewed slowly, swallowed, and wiped his mouth. Hello to you too. Ariana, did you call Crescent Bay Billing and try to move Lila's surgery to October? I repeated, louder. Marianne looked at Gordon. He didn't flinch. We were trying to help. Gordon said, Help? I practically screamed. By canceling her operation? By managing the schedule? Gordon shouted back, standing up. We cannot pay the deposit right now. Ariana, if you don't move it, you are going to default, and then the hospital will send it to collections and ruin your credit. We were protecting you. You impersonated me. I said, that is fraud. Dad, that is criminal. Oh, stop it, Marianne said, waving her hand. You are being dramatic. It is family. We are all stressed. I just wanted to take the pressure off. If the surgery is in October, we will have the boat money coming in. It solves everything. It solves everything for Ethan. I said, it leaves Lila in pain for 5 more months. She is fine, Marianne insisted. She is playing. She is happy. You are the one making this into a tragedy. I looked at them. They truly believed it. They believed that their convenience was the same thing as morality. I pulled out my phone and opened the credit app. And what about Bayview Lending, I asked. Why did a lender run my credit 3 days ago? The color drained from my father's face. It was instant. He went from red-faced anger to a pale, clammy gray. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. "Do not lie to me." I said, "Not about this. Is my name on the boat loan?" Gordon crossed his arms. "We did what we had to do to keep the family from drowning. Ethan's credit is repairing. We needed a co-signer to secure the rate. It is just a formality. Ariana, I am paying the note. You won't even know it is there. You used my identity." I said, "You stole my credit history to buy a boat while telling me you couldn't help save my daughter." "It is an investment," he roared. "If we don't get the boat, we don't have the income. If we don't have the income, we can't help you. We are doing this for you." I looked at my mother. She was studying the lasagna, refusing to meet my eyes. "I am freezing my credit," I said. "I am disputing the inquiry, and I'm closing that joint account you left open. If you do that," Gordon said, his voice low and dangerous, "you will kill the deal. The financing is in final underwriting. If they see a dispute, they will pull the loan. Ethan loses the boat. Good," I said. Gordon leaned over the table. "If you ruin this for your brother, Ariana, do not expect us to be there when you fail, and you will fail. You cannot do this alone. Watch me," I said. I turned and walked out. My legs were shaking so hard I could barely operate the pedals of the car. I went home and locked the door. I sat on the floor of the living room and logged into the credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. I placed a freeze on all three. Then I checked my fundraiser. I needed to see the number go up. I needed to see that there was still good in the world. The total was stuck at $850. It hadn't moved in 2 days. I clicked on the comments. There, near the top, was a comment from my Aunt Sheila, my father's sister-in-law, a woman who worshipped the ground Gordon walked on. "I am confused. Gordon told us at church that he offered to pay for the whole thing. But Ariana refused because she wanted to use a holistic doctor out of state. It seems strange to ask for money when family has already offered. Let's pray for clarity." I stared at the screen. They were planting landmines. They were telling people I had refused their help. They were painting me as unstable, ungrateful, and weird. I wanted to scream. I wanted to reply and post the credit report and the hospital log. But I remembered Dr. Halberg. Document everything. I took a screenshot of the comment. Then I took a screenshot of the text message where my mother said I can't choose between my children. I created a folder on my laptop titled Evidence. Just then, I heard a thud from the bedroom. "Lila?" I ran in. Lila was on the floor next to her bed. She wasn't moving. "Lila!" I dropped to my knees. She was conscious, but her face was pale and she was clutching her legs. My legs went to sleep. "Mommy," she whispered, tears leaking from her eyes. And when I stood up, I fell. I couldn't feel them. I gathered her into my lap. Her legs were cold. The circulation was getting worse. The doctor had warned me about this. Numbness, weakness. It was a sign the compression was increasing. I rubbed her legs, my hands moving frantically to bring the warmth back. "It is okay, baby," I said. "I have got you." I held her until she stopped crying. Until the color returned to her cheeks, I put her into bed and tucked the quilt around her. I walked back into the living room. The fear was gone. The hesitation was gone. The lingering desire to be a good daughter and protect my parents' feelings had evaporated in the instant Lila hit the floor. Fairness was a luxury I could no longer afford. My parents weren't playing by the rules of family. They were playing a zero-sum game where Ethan won and Lila lost. I looked at the folder on my laptop. I wasn't going to negotiate anymore. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to burn their little fantasy to the ground. And I was going to use the heat to warm my daughter's future. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for the legal aid clinic again. I left a message. "My name is Ariana Ross. I need to report a case of identity theft and financial coercion. Please call me back. It is urgent." I hung up. The silence in the apartment was heavy. But it wasn't empty. It was filled with the specific, terrifying clarity of a mother who has realized she is the only thing standing between her child and the wolves. The waiting room of the Bayview County Legal Aid Clinic smelled of stale coffee and industrial floor wax. It was a place where people came when they had run out of options. A purgatory of plastic chairs and fluorescent lights. I sat in the corner, clutching a manila folder that contained my credit report, the hospital log, and the printout of the text messages from my mother, Mr. Vance was younger than I expected, with sleeves rolled up to his elbows and a tie that had been loosened hours ago. He looked at my documents with the practiced speed of someone who had seen every variation of family betrayal imaginable. "So, let me get this straight," he said, tapping a pen against the desk. "Your parents are not just refusing to help with the medical costs. You believe they have actively interfered with the hospital scheduling and have initiated a credit inquiry in your name without authorization." "Yes," I said. My voice was steady. I had practiced this in the car. "And you want to know your options. I want it to stop." I said, "I do not want to put them in jail. I do not want to ruin their reputation in the community. I just want them to stop using my name. I want them to stop touching my life." "Mr. Vance leaned back. "Miss Ross, there is a term for what you are describing. It is called familial fraud or friendly fraud, but the law doesn't care about the adjective. Identity theft is identity theft. If they used your social security number to apply for a loan, that is a felony. If they impersonated you to alter medical records, that is potentially another set of charges." I felt a cold knot in my stomach. A felony. I pictured my father in handcuffs, my mother weeping on the witness stand. The guilt was instant. A reflex bred into me over 33 years. "I do not want to press charges." I said, "Mr. Vance sighed. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Here is the problem. Ms. Ross, to dispute the debt or the inquiry effectively, the creditors usually require a police report. If you tell the bank, 'I didn't sign this,' their first question is, 'Who did?' If you say, 'My father,' and then refuse to file a report, the bank often assumes you are complicit or that it is a civil dispute. They might refuse to remove the inquiry." He looked at me with sympathetic but hard eyes. "You cannot have it both ways. You cannot protect them from the consequences of their actions while protecting yourself from the damage. You have to choose who you are saving." I thought of Lila falling on the floor. I thought of her legs going numb. "I am saving my daughter," I said. "Then we start with a paper firewall." He said, "We file a cease and desist. We file formal disputes, and you lock down your personal information so tight that even you have trouble accessing it." I spent the next 3 hours filling out forms. It was tedious, unglamorous work. I wrote letters to the hospital administration, formally revoking any authorization for Gordon or Marianne Ross to discuss Lila's care. I demanded a password be placed on her account. I wrote to Bayview Lending Services, stating clearly that I had not applied for any credit and demanding proof of the application. I wrote to the 3 credit bureaus, extending the fraud alert to 7 years. Every signature felt like I was severing a limb, but as I walked out of the clinic, the folder in my hand felt lighter. It wasn't a request anymore. It was a fortress. That evening, I met Caleb at the public library. It was a neutral ground, quiet and filled with witnesses. He was sitting at a back table, wearing a clean shirt, his hands clasped on top of a stack of papers. I sat down opposite him. I went to legal aid. I said, "Good," he said. "What did they say?" "That I might have to file a police report if the lender pushes back." Caleb nodded. He didn't look surprised. He looked like he had been expecting this. "I have been doing some math." "Ari," he said. I stiffened. "I didn't want charity. I know you don't want my money," he said quickly, reading my face. "And honestly, I don't have enough liquid cash to cover the gap anyway. But I have good credit. Better than it was when we were married. I paid off the truck. I cleared the cards." He slid a paper across the table. It was a loan application from a credit union. "It is a medical bridge loan." He said, "Low interest. I can't take it out alone because the medical bills aren't in my name, but I can co-sign." I looked at the document. A co-signer. It was exactly what my father had claimed he needed me for. "Caleb," I started, "I cannot ask you to risk your credit. If I can't pay it back, then I pay it back." He interrupted, "And you pay me when you can." "But the strings," I said, "I cannot handle strings right now. I cannot handle you holding this over me if we disagree on Lila's school or her summer schedule." Caleb reached into his bag and pulled out another sheet of paper. It was handwritten, but the handwriting was neat and blocky. Agreement between Caleb Morrow and Ariana Ross. 1. Caleb Morrow agrees to co-sign loan number 8842 for the sole purpose of Lila Ross's surgery. 2. Default on payment by Ariana Ross will be covered by Caleb Morrow without penalty or interest. 3. This financial agreement has no bearing on custody arrangements, visitation schedules, or personal relationship status. 4. This is for Lila. He signed it at the bottom. He pushed it toward me, along with a pen. "Zero leverage," he said. "I am not trying to buy my way back in. Ari, I am trying to make sure our kid can walk without pain. You are doing the heavy lifting. You are dealing with the doctors, the insurance, the day-to-day. Let me be the wallet. Let me be useful." I looked at his signature. It was the same signature that had been on our marriage license and on our divorce decree. But this time, it looked different. It looked solid. I picked up the pen. My hand was shaking, but I signed. "Thank you," I whispered. "Don't thank me," he said, taking the papers back. "Just tell me where to send the check when it clears." I drove home feeling a strange sensation in my chest. It was the feeling of ground stabilizing under my feet. When I got home, I saw an email notification on my phone. It was from Aunt Lorna. Subject: FYI, the wedding fund. I hesitated. I wasn't sure I could handle more family history tonight, but Lorna didn't send emails often. I opened it. There was no text in the body of the email, just 3 attachments. They were screenshots of bank statements from 7 years ago. I zoomed in. The first image was a statement from a savings account under Gordon's name. The balance was substantial, nearly $40,000. The date was 3 months before my wedding. I remembered that time. I had wanted a venue by the water, a modest place, but beautiful. Gordon had sat me down and told me, with tears in his eyes, that the market had taken a terrible turn. The portfolio is bleeding. "Ariana, we have to be careful. Can you do the reception at the church hall? It would save us so much stress." I had agreed. I had scaled back everything. I bought a sample dress. I made the centerpieces myself. I felt guilty for even asking for a wedding. I looked at the second screenshot. It was dated 2 weeks after that conversation. Transfer out, $32,000. Recipient, Bullseye, Marina Storage. I stared at the screen. $32,000 to a marina. I clicked on the third attachment. It was an email from the same time period, forwarded by Lorna. It was from Gordon to Lorna. "Lorna, I need you to sign off on the trust distribution early. Ethan is in a bind with that jet ski venture. If we don't bail him out, he is facing litigation. I will put the money back before the end of the year. Do not tell Marianne." The breath left my lungs in a sharp hiss. There was no market crash. There was no portfolio bleeding. There was just Ethan. Ethan and a jet ski business that I vaguely remembered him talking about for a month before it vanished. My wedding budget hadn't been cut because of the economy. It had been cut to pay for Ethan's mistakes. The realization washed over me, cold and clarifying. The Ross Family Emergency Fund wasn't a safety net for the family. It was a slush fund for Ethan. It always had been. I was just the secondary character who was expected to make do with less, so there was more for him to lose. I closed the laptop. I wasn't sad. I was furious. And fury, I was learning, was a much better fuel than grief. I knew where to find Ethan. If he wasn't at his apartment, and he wasn't at a job he didn't have, he would be at the marina. He liked to hang around the docks, talking to the boat owners, pretending to be one of them. It was a Thursday afternoon. I drove to the Harbor Ridge Marina. The sun was bright. glinting off the white fiberglass of 100 boats that cost more than my life's earnings. I saw him near the fuel dock. He was wearing aviator sunglasses and a polo shirt with a popped collar. He was talking to a mechanic, gesturing expansively with his hands. I parked the car and walked down the pier. The wood groaned under my feet. "Ethan!" I called out. He turned. When he saw me, his smile faltered, but he quickly plastered it back on. "Ari, what are you doing here? Come to see the future office?" He swept his hand toward the water, where a sleek 30-foot center console boat was tied up. It was beautiful. It was aggressive. It looked fast. I ignored the boat. I walked right up to him, invading his personal space. "I know about the wedding money." "Ethan," he blinked. "What? 7 years ago? The jet ski lawsuit? Dad drained the account to bail you out, and told me the market crashed, so I had to have a budget wedding." Ethan's face went rigid. He glanced at the mechanic. "Excuse us for a second. Jim, family stuff." The mechanic shrugged and walked away. Ethan turned on me, his voice low and hissing. "Why are you digging up ancient history? You are obsessed." "I am not digging," I said. "It is surfacing, just like the truth about this charter business." I pointed at the boat. "You don't have a captain's license." "Ethan, you don't have an LLC. You don't have insurance." I checked. "So?" he said, crossing his arms. "I am working on it. The paperwork is just red tape." "No." I said, "It is the law. You are not buying a business. You are buying a status symbol. You are buying a toy because you can't stand that your friends are moving on, and you are still the same screw-up you were in high school." Ethan's face turned an ugly shade of mottled red. "Shut up," he said. "You are 35, I said, relentless, and you are letting Mom and Dad steal my identity to buy this for you. Do you know they used my name on the loan application?" He flinched, just a fraction, but I saw it. He knew. "It is just a cosign," he muttered. "Dad said he would handle the payments. And if he misses one?" I asked. "It destroys my credit. It destroys my ability to rent an apartment. It destroys my life." "He won't miss one," Ethan said. "Like he didn't miss replacing the trust money?" I asked. "Aunt Lorna told me about that too. He never put it back." "Did he?" Ethan stepped forward. He loomed over me, trying to use his height to intimidate me. "You think you are so perfect, don't you? Ariana the martyr, Ariana the good girl. You did everything right. You went to college. You got the job. You got married. And look at you now. Divorced, broke, living in a rental. I didn't step back. I am paying my own way." I said, "You are jealous." He spat. "That is what this is. You are jealous because, for once, they are betting on me." "Betting on you?" I laughed. It was a harsh, jagged sound. "They are not betting on you. Ethan, they are enabling you because they are afraid of you. They are afraid if they stop paying, you will collapse." Ethan's expression crumbled. The arrogance vanished, replaced by a raw, naked resentment. Mom and Dad finally chose me. He whispered. It was a childish, venomous thing to say, but he meant it. "They chose you over Lila." I said, "Over a 7-year-old girl." He looked away, staring at the water lapping against the pilings. "She can wait," he said. "The doctor said it wasn't life or death." I looked at him, my brother, the boy I had shared a bunk bed with, the boy I had protected on the playground. I saw nothing left of him but need. "Enjoy the boat." "Ethan," I said, "I hope it is worth it." I walked away. I didn't look back. The next morning, I was back in the trenches. "Doctor," Halberg called me at 10 o'clock. "Ariana, we hit a snag with the expedited review. The insurance medical director wants a letter from a neurologist specifically addressing the nerve conduction velocity. They are claiming the numbness Lila experienced is subjective." I felt the familiar panic rising, but I pushed it down. "Okay," I said. "How do we get it?" "I have already called Dr. Evans' office," she said. "He is writing it now, but we need to get the raw data from the last scan sent over. The records department at the hospital is backed up. If you can go there in person and sign a release, they have to give it to you immediately. I am on my way." I said, "I used my lunch break to drive to the hospital. I stood at the records counter, tapping my foot, while a slow-moving clerk printed 50 pages of data. While I waited, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my cousin Sarah, the one who had tagged my parents in the fundraiser. "Ariana, I am just checking in. Your mom called me in tears. She is so worried about you. She says you are not sleeping and you are making up stories about them. Is everything okay? We are all concerned about your mental state given the stress you have been under since the divorce." I stared at the screen. Mental state. Making up stories. They were doing it. They were building the narrative that I was crazy, if I was crazy. Then my accusations about the money were delusions. If I was unstable, then my financial problems were my own fault. It was smart. It was vicious. And it was working. I scrolled through my messages. There were 2 others, one from an aunt. "Honey, please let your parents help you manage things. You don't have to carry the world alone." One from a family friend. "Praying for your peace of mind." They weren't asking if the fraud was real. They were assuming I was the problem. I took the medical records from the clerk. I walked out to my car. I sat there, holding the warm stack of paper, and looked at the phone. I could fight them one by one. I could send screenshots of the credit inquiry to every person in the family, but that would look manic. That would look exactly like what they were accusing me of. A woman spiraling. I needed to be the opposite of manic. I needed to be cold, hard, factual. I opened my social media. I went to the fundraiser page. I deleted the long, emotional description I had written at the beginning. I deleted the updates about my feelings. I wrote a new post. Update on Lila's surgery. Surgery date, June 14th. Total deposit required, $4,500. Current funds raised, $1,250. Remaining balance needed, $3,250. Deadline, June 7th. All funds go directly to Crescent Bay Children's Hospital. I have posted a photo of the billing estimate below for transparency. We are currently navigating some insurance delays and family financial constraints, so every share helps. Thank you for focusing on Lila. I attached the photo of the bill. I didn't mention my parents. I didn't mention the boat. I didn't mention the fraud. Family financial constraints. It was a phrase that could mean anything, but in the context of their country club lifestyle, it raised a question. It was a dignified silence that screamed louder than any accusation. I hit post. Within 10 minutes, the concerned text stopped. The rumor mill didn't know what to do with a spreadsheet. You can't call a billing estimate hysterical. I went back to work. That afternoon, a coworker named Brenda leaned over my cubicle wall. She was a quiet woman who knit during lunch breaks. "I saw your post," she said softly. I nodded. "Thanks. Brenda, my sister works in administration at the hospital." She said, "She told me about the Crescent Bay Guardian Fund. Have you applied?" I shook my head. "I have never heard of it. It is for pediatric cases that fall through the cracks," she said. "It is not advertised because the funding is limited. It is mostly donor money from local philanthropists. It is competitive. Ariana, but my sister says they favor cases where the parent is working but just can't bridge the gap." She slid a sticky note onto my desk with a name and an email address. Sarah Jenkins. Jenkins@cbch.org. "Write to her today." Brenda said, "Tell her everything." I wrote the email that night. I attached the denial letter, the bill, and the letter from Dr. Halberg. I explained about the deposit deadline. I didn't mention the fraud. I wanted to look stable, not embroiled in drama. I hit send at 11 p.m. I was exhausted. My eyes were burning. But I felt a strange sense of momentum. I had the legal disputes filed. I had Caleb's loan application in process. I had the insurance appeal moving. I had the Guardian Fund application out. I was building a web of support that didn't rely on the people who shared my DNA. I was just about to close my laptop when a new email pinged into my inbox. It wasn't from the hospital. It wasn't from Dr. Halberg. It was from Bayview Lending Services. Subject: Final notice. Verification required for loan application number 99201. My heart hammered against my ribs. I opened it. "Dear Ms. Ross. We are attempting to finalize the underwriting for the secured asset loan regarding the 2024 Sea Ray vessel. We have received the electronic signature for the primary borrower, Ethan Ross, and the secondary guarantor, Ariana Ross. However, due to the fraud alert recently placed on your credit file, we require verbal verification of your identity to release the funds. Please call our fraud department immediately at the number below. Failure to verify within 24 hours will result in the application being suspended. I stared at the words. Secured asset loan. 2024 Sea Ray vessel. Ethan Ross. Ariana Ross. They hadn't just inquired. They had applied. They had used my name, my social security number, and my history to buy the boat. And they had forged my electronic signature. The only reason it hadn't gone through yet was because I had frozen my credit 24 hours ago. I looked at the timestamp on the email. It was sent 5 minutes ago. Gordon and Ethan were probably sitting by the phone right now, waiting for the funds to clear. Wondering why there was a delay, I wasn't just a bystander anymore. I was the obstacle. I picked up my phone. I didn't call the lender. I took a screenshot of the email. Then I opened the folder on my laptop titled Evidence and dragged the screenshot inside. The file was getting thick. I looked at the date on the calendar. June 2nd, 5 days until the deadline. They wanted a verification? I would give them a verification, but it wasn't going to be the one they wanted. I closed the laptop, turned off the light, and sat in the dark, listening to Lila's steady breathing from the next room. The war had just moved from the living room to the legal system, and I was ready. I sat in the glow of my office monitor, the hum of the air conditioning the only sound in the empty break room. It was 7 a.m. I had come in early, not to work, but to hunt. On the screen was the PDF from Bayview Lending Services, the one I had pulled from the secure message center after guessing my father's default password. His birthday followed by the word Saints. It was a gamble, but Gordon was a creature of habit. I scrolled to the signature page. Signed, Ariana Marie Ross. Timestamp, May 30th. 10:14 a.m. IP address. Verified. May 30th. That was last Tuesday. I opened a new tab and logged into my company's timekeeping software. I pulled up my timesheet for the same date. Clock in, 8 a.m. Clock out, 5:30 p.m. I wasn't done. I walked to the security desk in the lobby. The guard, a heavy-set man named Ralph, who always asked about Lila, looked up from his crossword puzzle. "Morning, Ari," he said. "You are here early. Hey, Ralph, I need a favor. I need a printout of my badge swipes for last Tuesday. I think payroll missed a punch, and I want to double-check before I email them." Ralph nodded. "Easy enough." He typed a few commands, and the printer whirred. He handed me a sheet of thermal paper. May 30th. Entry turnstile. A. 7:58 a.m. May 30th. Door 4, break room. 10:10 a.m. May 30. Door 4, break room. 10:25 a.m. At 10:14 in the morning, the exact minute my electronic signature was being affixed to a $40,000 boat loan 20 miles away. I was physically inside the secure break room of my office building. I had been buying a bagel. I remembered it clearly because the vending machine had eaten my dollar. I held the two pieces of paper side by side. The loan document, the security log. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a clerical error. It was proof. I drove to the Harbor Ridge police station on my lunch break. It was a brick building that smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant. I asked for the fraud division. Detective Miller was a man in his 50s with tired eyes and a desk piled high with manila folders. He didn't offer me coffee. He just pointed to the chair. I explained everything. The surgery, the denial, the loan inquiry, the timestamp. I laid the documents out on his desk like a hand of cards. He looked at them for a long time. He tapped the signature on the loan application. "This is a problem. Ms. Ross," he said, "identity theft within families is common. Usually, it is a parent using a child's credit because their own is shot, or a child using a parent's. But proving intent to defraud is tricky when there is a history of shared finances. Did you ever give your father power of attorney?" "No," I said, "Never." "Did you ever sign a document giving him permission to act on your behalf for financial matters?" "No." He leaned back in his chair. "If you file this report, it becomes a criminal matter. It is not just a disputes process anymore. We investigate. We subpoena records. If we find that your father or brother signed this, the district attorney could press charges: forgery, identity theft, larceny by trick. These are felonies." I looked at his badge. I looked at the picture of his own family on the desk. A wife and 2 teenage sons. "I just want the loan canceled." I said, "I want my name off it." "The best way to do that is to have a police report number." Miller said, "It forces the lender to treat it as fraud rather than a civil dispute. But you need to understand the fallout. Once you ring this bell, you cannot unring it." I thought about Lila. I thought about the way her legs had given out. I thought about Ethan's smirk when he said Mom and Dad finally chose me. "File it," I said. Miller nodded. He pulled a form from his drawer. "One more thing," he said. "You need to contact this Bayview Lending immediately. Tell them you have filed a police report and demand that they preserve all digital records associated with the application. Metadata, IP addresses, device IDs. Lenders delete incomplete applications to save server space. You need that data frozen before it vanishes." I walked out of the station with a case number on a small white card. Case number 24-9902. It felt heavy in my pocket, like a stone. I was in the grocery store aisle, staring at boxes of macaroni and cheese, when my phone rang. It was my father. I debated not answering, but ignoring him felt like hiding, and I was done hiding. "Hello, Dad, Ariana." His voice was warm, almost sweet. It was his Sunday voice, the one he used when he was greeting deacons at church. "Your mother told me you visited with some papers the other day. She said you were upset." "I am not upset. Dad, I am busy." "Listen, honey," he said, "I know things have been tense. We are all on edge about Lila. But I think we need to de-escalate. All this talk about credit reports and legal aid, it is creating a rift. We are family. We handle things internally." "You handled it internally when you forged my signature?" I asked. There was a pause. The warmth evaporated, replaced by a cold, flat tone. "I don't know who is feeding you these ideas. Ariana, maybe it is that ex-husband of yours. But you are making a mistake. You are looking at standard financial maneuvering and calling it a crime." "It is a crime," I said. "I went to the police today. Dad, I filed a report." The silence on the other end was absolute. I could hear the faint static of the line. "You did what?" he whispered. "I filed a report for identity theft." I said, "Detective Miller is handling it. He told me to tell the lender to preserve the metadata." "Ariana, you withdraw that report right now." "I can't." I said, "It is filed." "You have no idea what you are doing," he said, his voice rising. "You are going to destroy your brother's future. You are going to humiliate your mother." "Over what? A deposit? We could have worked this out." "We tried to work it out." I said, "You said no. You said the boat came first. If you do this," he hissed, "if you bring the police into my house, you won't have a family left. Do you understand me? You will be alone. No support, no safety net, nothing." I gripped the handle of the shopping cart. "I am already alone. Dad, you made sure of that when you stole from me." I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from clarity. The threat wasn't about money. It never had been. It was about control. They didn't mind if I struggled, as long as I struggled on their terms. They didn't mind if I suffered, as long as I didn't make them look bad. I blocked his number. The next morning, I received an email from Sarah Jenkins at the Crescent Bay Guardian Fund. "Dear Ms. Ross, the committee has reviewed your application. We were moved by Lila's situation. While our funds are critically low this quarter, we have approved a partial grant of $2,000 toward the surgical deposit. We require the remaining balance to be paid in full by the family before we can release the grant. Please provide proof of the remaining funds by 5 p.m. on Friday." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. $2,000. I did the math on a napkin. Total deposit, $4,500. Grant, $2,000. Fundraiser, $1,250. Gap, $1,250. I called Caleb. The grant came through. I said, half of it? That is great news. Ari, he said, we are still short $1,200. I said, and the fundraiser has stalled. I have the loan approval from the credit union. He said, I can draw down $1,500 today. I will write you a check tonight. I closed my eyes. It was going to work. It was razor thin, but it was going to work. We have to pay by Friday. I said, I will bring the check over. He said, we will get it done. I hung up and looked at Lila. She was building a tower out of blocks on the living room rug. It was leaning precariously to the left, but she was carefully adding one more piece to the top. We are going to make it, baby, I whispered. There was a knock at the door. I checked the peephole. It was my mother. She was holding a covered dish. I opened the door but left the chain on. Mom, I said. Ariana, please, she said. Her eyes were red and puffy. I brought a tuna casserole, Lila's favorite. I looked at the casserole. It was the universal currency of guilt in our family. Food meant I am sorry, but it also meant, stop talking about it. I undid the chain and let her in. She walked straight to the kitchen and put the dish on the counter. Then she turned to me and burst into tears. We are just so scared, she sobbed. I stood there, arms crossed. Scared of what? Of losing everything. She said, the business, the house. Your father he is not himself. He is under so much pressure. And now with the police. Ariana, how could you? You know why. Mom, it was just a signature, she cried. A formality. Ethan needed the boat to start his life. We were going to pay it back. We would never have let it hurt you. You hurt me the moment you chose his boat over Lila's spine. I said, she wiped her eyes with a tissue she pulled from her sleeve. We didn't choose. She insisted. We were trying to do both. We thought the insurance would come through. We thought you were exaggerating the urgency. Exaggerating? I walked over to the table where Lila was playing. Look at her. Mom, look at how she sits. Her left leg is at a different angle than her right. Marianne glanced at Lila, then looked away quickly. We can fix this, she said, lowering her voice. If you drop the report, if you just call the detective and say it was a misunderstanding, your father will pay the deposit. He will find the money. He has a way. I looked at her. He has a way? You told me the fund was empty. It is, she said, but he has sources. Then she slipped. He has to get the loan. Ariana, Ethan's lender is calling nonstop. They are threatening to pull the financing if we don't verify your identity today, if the loan falls through. We lose the deposit on the boat, $10,000. We can't lose that money. I froze. Ethan's lender is calling nonstop. That was the truth. That was the real panic. It wasn't about family unity. It wasn't about love. It was about the fact that they were 24 hours away from losing a $10,000 down payment on a boat they couldn't afford. The fraud was active. They were still trying to push the loan through. I looked at my mother, this woman who had nursed me through chickenpox, who had taught me to braid my hair. I saw a stranger. I saw a woman who was so desperate to protect her husband's ego and her son's delusions that she would sacrifice her daughter's financial survival. Get out, I said. Ariana, get out, I shouted. Lila jumped. The block tower crashed to the floor. Marianne flinched. She grabbed her purse. You are making a mistake, she said, her voice trembling. You are hard, Ariana. You have become so hard. I opened the door. Take the casserole, I said. She looked at me, shocked. Then she walked out, leaving the dish on the counter. I locked the door. I threw the casserole in the trash, dish and all. Then I went to my computer. I changed every password I had. Email, bank, social media, Netflix. I logged into the hospital portal. I removed Gordon and Marianne Ross from the authorized contact list. I added a note in all caps. No information to be released to grandparents. Security alert. I called Lila's school. I removed them from the pickup list. I built a wall. Brick by brick. The next day, Wednesday, Ethan was waiting for me in the parking lot of my office building. He was leaning against my car, wearing sunglasses. I stopped 10 feet away. Get off my car. Ethan. He stood up, raising his hands in a mock surrender. Relax. Ari, I just want to talk. We have nothing to talk about. Yes, we do, he said. He took a step closer. Dad told me about the police report. You really went nuclear. Huh? I didn't say anything. I unlocked my car with the remote, hoping the beep would make him move. It didn't. Look, he said, dropping the casual act. Here's the deal. You call the cop. You tell him you made a mistake. You tell him you gave me verbal permission and you just forgot. You kill the investigation. And in exchange? I asked. In exchange, I find the money for Lila's deposit. I laughed. A dry, humorless sound. You don't have any money. Ethan, that is the whole problem. I can get it, he said. I have a friend who owes me. I can get you $4,000 in cash by tomorrow, but only if the police report goes away. I looked at him. He was sweating, a thin sheen of perspiration on his upper lip. You are trying to bribe me with money you don't have, to cover up a felony you already committed. It is not a bribe, he said. It is a settlement. It is a trap, I said. If I take money from you, I look complicit. If I drop the report, I admit to making a false claim. And then the loan goes through, and I am on the hook for $40,000 when you inevitably crash that boat or lose interest in the business. Ethan's face twisted. You are such a bitch, he spat. You always think you are smarter than everyone else. I am not smarter. I said, I am just not a liar. I got into my car and locked the doors. Ethan banged his fist on the window once, hard, then turned and walked away. I watched him go. He looked small. That evening, Aunt Lorna came over. She didn't bring a casserole. She brought a bottle of wine and a stack of papers. We sat at the kitchen table after Lila was asleep. I heard about the police report. Lorna said, Good for you. It doesn't feel good. I said, It feels like amputation. Sometimes the limb is gangrenous, she said. She poured us both a glass. I have something else to show you, she said. It is about the trust. She opened the folder. My father, your grandfather, left a small trust when he died. It wasn't millions, but it was significant. It was meant to be divided among the grandchildren when the youngest turned 25. That was you. I frowned. I never saw any trust money. Exactly, Lorna said. Because Gordon was the executor. He had power of attorney over the accounts. She slid a spreadsheet across the table. I hired a forensic accountant last year. She said, just to satisfy my own curiosity, look at the withdrawals. I looked, 2018. Withdrawal, $15,000. Notation, educational expenses, 2019. Withdrawal, $22,000. Notation, medical hardship, 2020. Withdrawal, $18,000. Notation, property maintenance. There were dozens of them. Small drips at first, then hemorrhages. There were no educational expenses in 2018, I said. I was already out of school. Ethan was. I don't know what Ethan was doing. He was in debt, Lorna said. That was the year he tried to flip those houses in Florida and lost his shirt. Gordon covered it with your grandfather's money. And the medical hardship? I asked. Lorna swirled her wine. That was the year Ethan crashed his car and had those dental surgeries. Gordon paid cash so his insurance rates wouldn't spike. I stared at the total at the bottom of the page. The balance was 0. He stole it all. I whispered, he spent it. Lorna corrected. On Ethan, and on keeping up the appearance that he was a successful provider, he stole your inheritance to protect his own ego. I felt a cold rage settle in my bones. It wasn't just the boat, it was my whole adult life. The times I had eaten ramen to pay rent, the times I had panicked about car repairs, the times I had stayed in a bad marriage too long because I couldn't afford to leave. All that time, there was money that belonged to me, money that could have bought me freedom, and he had given it to Ethan. I picked up the papers. Can I keep these? Lorna nodded. Burn him down. Ariana. Thursday night, the night before the deadline. I sat at my computer. I had the timeline. I had the screenshots of the texts. I had the lender notice. I had the police report number. And now, I had the trust fund accounting. I opened a document. The truth about the Ross family finances. I started typing. I laid it all out. Dispassionate. Clinical. Fact 1. On May 30th. A loan application was submitted using my identity. Evidence, IP logs, and workplace security footage confirm I was not present. Fact 2. The hospital deposit was not paid by family, despite claims. Evidence. Hospital billing logs showing cancellations. Fact 3. The grandchildren's trust was depleted by unauthorized withdrawals. Evidence. Bank statements, 2018 to 2021. I created a PDF. I opened my email. In the BCC field, I added every email address I had for the extended family. My aunts, my cousins, the people at church who had looked at me with pity, the people who had commented on my fundraiser. I hovered my mouse over the send button. If I sent this, there was no going back. I would be the pariah. I would be the daughter who aired the dirty laundry. I would be the one who broke the family. My father's voice echoed in my head. You won't have a family left. I looked at the clock. It was 11:58 p.m. I didn't send it, not because I was afraid, but because I realized something. They weren't worth the energy of the click. Sending it was an act of engagement. It was a plea for understanding. I didn't need them to understand me anymore. I just needed them to lose. I saved the draft. Insurance. I thought, if they come for me again, I hit send. I went to bed. Friday morning. The deadline. I was at work, staring at the clock, waiting for Caleb to text me that he had the check. My phone rang at 10 a.m. It was the hospital. Mrs. Ross? It is Mrs. Halloway from finance. Hi, Mrs. Halloway. I'm getting the funds together. I will be there by 3. There is a problem, she said. Her voice was tight. What problem? I just got off the phone with the surgical scheduling team. We have a wait list for the OR. There is another family ready to take the slot for Monday morning, but I have until 5 today. I said, that was the agreement. The policy is that we hold it until we have a confirmed payment. She said, but if another patient can pay immediately, and you haven't, well, the administration is pressuring me to release the slot. No, I said, you can't do that. I can hold it until noon, she said. But if the deposit isn't posted by then, I have to give the slot to the other child. I am sorry. Ariana, it is out of my hands. Noon. That was 2 hours away. Caleb was at the bank. He hadn't texted. I called him. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I had the grant approval email. I had the fundraiser money in my bank account. But I didn't have Caleb's check. If I lost this slot, Lila would wait 8 months. 8 months of pain. 8 months of nerve damage. I grabbed my purse. I ran to the elevator. I had 2 hours to find $1,200, or my daughter would pay the price for my family's sins. The elevator doors opened. I stepped in. I was alone. I stood in the hospital lobby, watching the elevator numbers count down. 12, 11, 10. My phone was silent. Caleb was not answering. At 1 minute past 11, the glass doors at the main entrance slid open. Caleb Morrow jogged in. He looked disheveled, his shirt untucked on one side, sweat glistening on his forehead. He spotted me and waved a thick envelope. Traffic, he gasped, reaching me. And the bank manager had to override a hold because it was an out-of-network withdrawal. My battery died on the expressway. I didn't have time to be relieved. I grabbed his arm. We have 59 minutes, I said. We ran. We didn't sprint. Hospital security frowned on that. But we walked with a velocity that made people step out of our way. We took the stairs to the second floor because the elevator was taking too long. Mrs. Halloway looked up when we burst into her office. She glanced at the clock on the wall. It was 11:15. "You made it," she said. Though she didn't smile, she looked tired, like she had been fighting a silent battle on the phone all morning. "I have it," I said. I placed the envelope on her desk. Inside was a cashier's check for $1,500 from Caleb's credit union. "I have the confirmation number for the Guardian Fund grant, and I have transferred the fundraiser balance to my debit card." Mrs. Holloway pulled a file from her stack. "Okay," she said. "Let's do this before the system updates at noon." The next 20 minutes were a blur of keystrokes and card swipes. I watched her fingers move. I watched the printer spit out receipts. I watched her stamp a document with a heavy red ink block that said, "Confirmed." She handed me a single sheet of paper. Patient, Lila Ross. Procedure, spinal fusion and correction. Date, June 14th. Status, prepaid/secured. "There," she said. "No one can bump her now, not even the chief of surgery." I took the paper. It was light, flimsy, warm from the printer. It was worth more than my car. It was worth more than my dignity. "Thank you," I whispered. I walked out into the hallway. Caleb was waiting, leaning against the wall, drinking water from a paper cone. "It is done?" he asked. "It is done," I said. He let out a long breath and slid down the wall until he was crouching. Thank God. I looked at him, this man who had frustrated me for years, who I had divorced because we couldn't communicate, who had struggled to keep a job in the early days. He had come through. He had put his name on the line for our daughter when the great, wealthy, respectable Ross family had turned their backs. I sat down next to him on the linoleum floor. I didn't care who saw. We did it. I said, "We did." He said, I felt a massive, crushing wave of relief wash over me, but right behind it, riding its wake, was a grief so sharp it made me gasp. I started to cry. Not pretty crying, ugly, gasping sobs that echoed in the sterile corridor. Caleb put his arm around my shoulders. He didn't ask what was wrong. He knew. I wasn't crying because I was happy. I was crying because I had lost something. I had lost the last shred of the illusion that my parents were good people. I had lost the fantasy that if things got really bad, they would catch me. They hadn't caught me. They had watched me fall. And then they had complained about the noise I made when I hit the ground. I dried my eyes on my sleeve. I stood up. "I have to go back to work." I said, "I know." Caleb said. He stood up too. "I will pick up Lila from school. You rest tonight." "No," I said. "I am picking her up. I need to see her." I walked to my car. I sat in the driver's seat and stared at the steering wheel. I was exhausted. I was broke. I had a fraud investigation open against my father, but I had the receipt. I took a picture of the confirmation letter. I cropped out the financial details, leaving only the date and the words, "Status, secured." I posted it to the fundraiser page. Update. We did it. The deposit is paid. Lila's surgery is locked in for Monday. Thank you to the village who stepped up when the foundation crumbled. I turned off comments. I expected silence. I expected them to retreat, to lick their wounds, to pretend none of this had happened. I was wrong. 2 hours later, my phone rang at my desk. It was my mother. I had unblocked her number only because I needed to know if they tried to pull Lila out of school, though I had warned the administration. I answered, "Ariana," she said. Her voice wasn't apologetic. It was icy. "Hello, Mom, I saw your post," she said. "Good. Then you know she is getting the surgery." "I know you made us look terrible," she snapped. "When the foundation crumbled?" "Who was that aimed at?" "Ariana." "Everyone knows who you mean." "Sheila called me. She asked if we were bankrupt." I typed a sentence on my transcription screen, keeping my rhythm steady. "Are you bankrupt?" I asked. "That is not the point," she hissed. "The point is that you are airing private family matters to the public. You are humiliating your father. After everything he has done for you, he stole my identity. Mom. He forged my signature on a loan application. That is what he did for me." "That was a misunderstanding," she cried. "And now you have the police involved?" Ethan is beside himself. The lender has put a hold on the application because of the fraud alert. Good, I said. Ariana, listen to me. You have the surgery date. You won. You got what you wanted. Now call the detective and drop the report. If you don't, the boat deal dies. And if the boat deal dies, Ethan loses the deposit. I stopped typing. I don't care about Ethan's deposit. I said, I don't care about the boat. I don't care about the neighbors or Aunt Sheila or your reputation at the garden club. You are being cruel, she said. No, I said, I am being a mother. And since you clearly don't know what that word means, I think we are done talking. I hung up. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again, a number I didn't recognize, area code 704. I answered, thinking it might be the hospital. Ms. Ross? This is Marcus Dean from Bayview Lending. My stomach tightened. Yes, I am calling regarding the secured asset loan for the Sea Ray. We have a pending application with your name as secondary guarantor. We have received a notification of a fraud alert on your file. Yes, I said, I did not apply for that loan. Mr. Dean's voice dropped an octave. It became smoother, more predatory. Miss Ross, we have an electronic signature verification and an IP match from a device frequently used at the primary borrower's residence. If this is a case of buyer's remorse, I should warn you that filing a false fraud report is a serious offense. We are prepared to enforce the contract. He was threatening me. He thought I was just a nervous cosigner trying to back out. Mr. Dean, I said, keeping my voice flat. I have filed a police report with the Harbor Ridge Police Department. The case number is 24-9902. Detective Miller has already requested preservation of your digital records. If you contact me again for any reason other than to confirm the removal of my name, I will add harassment to the complaint. There was a silence on the line, the kind of silence that happens when a bully realizes the victim is holding a brick. I see, he said. I will note the file. He hung up. I put the phone down. My hands were trembling, but I felt a strange, cold power. They couldn't touch me. I had the truth. And for the first time in my life, I was using it as a weapon instead of a shield. Sunday morning arrived, the day before surgery. I hadn't planned to go to church. Stonebrook Community Church was my parents' territory. It was where they held court, where Gordon was a deacon, where Marianne organized the altar guild. But Lila asked to go. She liked the Sunday school teacher, a kind woman who let her sit in a chair instead of on the floor, and I needed to feel normal. I needed to pretend, just for an hour, that we were a regular family doing regular things. We arrived late. We slipped into a pew near the back. I saw the backs of their heads in the third row. Gordon's silver hair, perfectly combed. Marianne's stiff hat. Ethan wasn't there. He never was. The service was standard. Hymns, a sermon about patience. I tuned it out, focusing on the stained glass, holding Lila's hand. Then came the prayer requests. Usually, people stood up and asked for prayers for sick relatives or missionaries. Marianne stood up. She turned slightly, scanning the room until her eyes landed on me in the back row. She smiled, a sad, brave smile that didn't reach her eyes. I would like to ask for prayers for our family, she said, her voice projecting clearly. We are going through a deep crisis. There is division in our house. We ask for prayers for those who are confused, for those who are lashing out in anger because they are hurting. We pray for financial peace and for truth to be revealed. A murmur went through the congregation. Heads turned to look at me. She had done it. She had framed me as the prodigal, the angry daughter causing the crisis. She hadn't mentioned Lila. She hadn't mentioned the surgery, just the division. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. I stayed seated. Don't react. I told myself, that is what she wants. But then, Mrs. Gable stood up. She was one of Marianne's closest friends, a woman who thrived on gossip disguised as concern. We are also praying for little Lila, she said, looking right at me, and we pray that the Lord provides for her needs, so that her mother doesn't feel the need to, well, to use the child's condition to solicit funds from strangers when family is right there. The room went dead silent. It wasn't a prayer. It was an accusation. It was the rumor they had been spreading, that I was grifting, that I had rejected their help to make a scene. Lila looked up at me. Mommy? Why are they looking at us? Something inside me snapped. Not a loud snap. A quiet, decisive fracture. I stood up. I was wearing a simple navy dress. I held my purse in front of me. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I spoke in the voice I used for transcription. Clear, enunciated, neutral. Thank you for the prayers. Mrs. Gable, I said. The pastor looked nervous. Ariana. I kept going. I am happy to report that the Lord has provided. Lila's spinal surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock. The hospital has been paid in full. I paused. I let the words sink in. Paid in full. We paid it without the help of the family. I continued. And we paid it without the $40,000 that was applied for in my name without my consent. A gasp rippled through the room. Gordon stiffened. Marianne turned pale. I will not discuss the details in the house of God. I said, but I will not accept false witness against me. My daughter is having surgery. That is the only truth that matters today. I looked at Lila. Come on, baby. We are leaving. I walked out of the pew. I walked down the center aisle. I walked past Mrs. Gable, whose mouth was hanging open. I walked past my parents, who were staring straight ahead, frozen like statues. We walked out into the bright, blinding sunlight of the parking lot. I buckled Lila into her car seat. I was shaking now. The adrenaline was crashing. Ariana! It was a man's voice. I turned. Gordon was marching across the asphalt. He looked furious. His face was a mottled red. Behind him, Aunt Lorna was walking fast, her heels clicking on the pavement. Gordon stopped 3 feet from me. How dare you? He hissed. How dare you speak to Mrs. Gable like that? You embarrassed us in front of the entire congregation. I opened my car door. You embarrassed yourself. Dad, I just corrected the record. You are out of control, he shouted. You are unhinged. I am going to call the pastor. I am going to tell him. You are going to tell him what? Gordon? Lorna stepped between us. She was shorter than him, but she looked like a bulldog. You are going to tell him that you stole your grandchildren's trust fund? Lorna asked loudly. Gordon froze. Lorna held up her phone. I have the bank records on my screen right now. Gordon, I have the forensic audit. Do you want me to airdrop it to the church group chat? Gordon looked at her. The anger drained out of him, replaced by a sudden, terrifying hollowness. He looked old. Lorna. Don't, he whispered. Then back off, she said. Gordon looked at me. His eyes were pleading now. The money is gone. Ariana, he said. His voice was a rasp. I know. I said, you don't understand. He said, it wasn't just the boat. It wasn't just lifestyle. Ethan. He got into trouble. What kind of trouble? I asked. A lawsuit, Gordon said, rubbing his face. 2 years ago, he was managing that gym in Charlotte. There was an allegation. Harassment. Negligence. We had to settle. If we didn't, he would have gone to jail. It was $50,000. I stared at him. So you took it from the trust? I said, I had to. He said, he is my son. And when that ran out? I asked. You tried to take it from me. You tried to use my credit to buy him a boat so he could pretend to be a captain. He needs a win. Ariana, Gordon said, he is fragile. And Lila? I asked. Is she not fragile? Gordon looked at the car where Lila was sitting, oblivious, playing with a doll. She is strong, he said. You made her strong. Ethan. He never learned how to be strong because you never let him. I said, I got into the car. Don't come to the hospital. Dad, I said, Ariana, please, if you come, I will have security remove you. I mean it. I shut the door. I started the engine. I drove away, leaving him standing in the parking lot of the church where he was a deacon, looking at the ruin of the kingdom he had built on lies. The night before surgery was quiet. We were in Lila's bedroom. We had packed her bag, the pink pajamas, the stuffed rabbit named Mr. Fluff, the coloring books. She was sitting on the bed, looking small. "Mommy?" "Yes. Baby. Will it hurt?" I sat down next to her. I didn't lie to her. I never lied to her. "Yes, it will hurt a little bit when you wake up," I said, "but the doctors have medicine to make it better, and when it heals, your legs won't hurt anymore. You will be able to run as fast as the other kids." She thought about this. "Will you be there?" "I will be there the whole time," I said. "I will be there when you go to sleep. And I will be there when you wake up. I am not going anywhere." She leaned her head against my shoulder. "I am scared," she whispered. "I know," I said. "I am scared too." "But we are brave. We are brave," she repeated. I stayed with her until she fell asleep. I watched her chest rise and fall. I watched the way her eyelashes cast shadows on her cheeks. I went into the living room. Caleb had texted, "I will meet you at admissions at 6 a.m. Try to sleep." I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the streetlights. I thought about the last week. I thought about the paperwork, the lawyers, the police, the church. I felt like I had shed a skin. The Ariana who wanted to please her parents, who wanted to keep the peace, who wanted to be the good one. She was gone. She had died in that kitchen when my mother brought the casserole. The woman who remained was harder. She was colder. But she was solid. She was someone who could stare down a bank and a detective and a deacon and not blink. I had earned this courage. I had bought it with the currency of betrayal. My phone buzzed on the table. I looked at the time. 2:11 a.m. It was a text from my father. "I am coming to the hospital. Don't embarrass your mother." I stared at the screen. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an offer of support. It was a command. It was a threat. Don't embarrass us. Even now, at the 11th hour, his priority was the performance. He was coming to play the role of the doting grandfather. He was coming to stand in the waiting room and accept sympathy and look noble. And he expected me to play along. He expected me to step aside and let him rewrite the narrative. I looked at the message. Tomorrow was going to be the hardest day of my life. My daughter was going to be cut open, and my father was coming to make it about him. I didn't reply. I turned the phone off. I walked back into Lila's room and lay down on the rug beside her bed. I reached through the bars of the safety rail and held her hand. Let him come. I thought, let him try. Tomorrow would decide everything, not just for Lila's spine, but for the rest of my life. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I waited for the dawn. The automatic doors of Crescent Bay Children's Hospital slid open with a soft pneumatic hiss, admitting us into a world that felt entirely separate from the one we had left outside. It was 6:15 in the morning. The air was cool and smelled faintly of floor wax and coffee. I held Lila's hand. She was wearing her favorite oversized hoodie, the one with the sequined unicorn on the chest, and clutching Mr. Fluff by his worn velvet ear. Caleb walked on her other side, carrying her small duffel bag. We were a phalanx, a unit. The check-in process was efficient. There was no drama, no missing paperwork, no declination of cards. The woman at the desk smiled at Lila and gave her a wristband that looked like a bracelet. "You are a V. IP today." "Sweetie," the woman said, "that means very important patient." Lila managed a small, nervous smile. We took the elevator to the surgical floor. The pre-op area was a hive of quiet, purposeful activity. Nurses in blue scrubs moved with soft shoes. Monitors beeped in a rhythmic, reassuring cadence. It was professional. It was safe. It was everything my family was not. We were shown to a small curtained bay. A nurse named Sarah came in to take vitals. She was young, with kind eyes and a pin on her lanyard that said, "I listen." She spoke directly to Lila. Not over her head. "I'm going to put a little sticker on your finger to count your heartbeats," Sarah said, "and then we are going to change you into a fancy hospital gown. It has snaps on the shoulders like a superhero cape." Lila giggled. It was a dry, breathless sound, but it was a giggle. I stood in the corner, watching. I felt a strange sense of dissociation. My body was here, functioning, answering questions about allergies and last meals. But my mind was a fortress. I was scanning the perimeter, waiting for the invasion. It came at 6:45. I heard them before I saw them. My mother's voice, pitched slightly too high, carrying over the hum of the nurse's station. "We are looking for the Ross family. We are the grandparents." I stepped out of the curtained bay. I didn't want them in the small space. I didn't want their energy crowding Lila. Gordon and Marianne were standing at the nurse's station. They were dressed for a photo op. Gordon was in a blazer and pressed slacks. Marianne was wearing a pastel cardigan and pearls. They looked like the picture of concerned, respectable elders. They spotted me. Marianne's face crumpled into a performance of relief. "Ariana!" she cried, rushing forward. I stepped into her path, blocking the entrance to the bay. "Keep your voice down," I said. It was not a request. "Oh, honey," she whispered, reaching for my arm. "We barely slept. We have been praying all night. How is she?" "She is prepping." I said, "She is calm. I want her to stay that way." Gordon walked up behind her. He looked tired. There were gray circles under his eyes that the blazer couldn't hide. He didn't look at me. He looked at the curtain behind me. "We have a right to see our granddaughter." "Ariana," he said, "you have no rights here." I said, "You are visitors, and you are on thin ice. You can say hello. You can give her a hug, but if I hear one word about the loan, the boat, or the church, security will escort you out. Do you understand?" Gordon's jaw tightened. He looked like he wanted to argue, to assert his patriarchal dominance, but he looked around. Nurses were watching. A doctor was reviewing a chart nearby. He couldn't make a scene without breaking the character he was playing. "We understand," he said stiffly. I let them in. They were awkward. They hovered over the bed, offering platitudes that Lila was too young to understand. "You are going to be a brave soldier," Gordon said. "God has a plan," Marianne added. Lila looked at them with wide, polite eyes. She looked at me for translation. "Grandma and Grandpa are just here to say good luck," I said, smoothing her hair. Then, the curtain moved again. Ethan walked in. I hadn't expected him. Ethan hated hospitals. He hated anything that reminded him of mortality or weakness. But there he was, wearing expensive aviator sunglasses pushed up into his hair, a polo shirt that was tight across the chest, and a smile that looked like it had been drawn on with a marker. Hey," he said, breezing in like he was arriving at a brunch. "Here's the star of the show." The small room instantly felt suffocating. "What are you doing here?" "Ethan?" I asked. He turned to me, his smile not wavering. "Came to support my niece, Ari, making peace. Family sticks together, right?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, plush bear wearing a sailor's hat. "Got you this, kiddo," he said to Lila. "For the recovery." Lila took the bear. "Thank you, Uncle Ethan." I stared at the sailor hat on the bear. It was a boat reference. Even here, even now. He couldn't help himself. He had to mark his territory. I realized then why he was here. He wasn't here for Lila. He was here to be seen. He was here so that later, when the story was told, he could say, "I was at the hospital. I brought a gift. I am the good uncle." He was here to control the witnesses. The surgeon, Dr. Evans, entered the bay. He was a tall man with steady hands and a voice that commanded instant silence. "Good morning, Lila," he said. "Are you ready to get those legs fixed?" Lila nodded. "Doctor?" Evans looked at the crowd in the small room. He looked at Gordon, Marianne, and Ethan. Then he looked at me and Caleb. "I need the room cleared for the anesthesia team," he said. "2 parents only." I looked at my parents. "You heard him," I said. Marianne looked offended. "But we want to pray over her." "You can pray in the waiting room," I said. Ethan clapped his hands together. All right. Let the pros do their work. We will be right outside." "Ari?" They filed out. I watched them go. They walked not like people burdened by worry, but like actors exiting a stage, waiting for their next cue. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. I was focused on Lila. The anesthesiologist, a woman named Dr. Wu, came in. She started explaining the sleepy juice to Lila. My phone buzzed again, then again. I pulled it out, annoyed. It was a number I didn't recognize, but under the number. My phone suggested a caller ID. Det. Miller, H. RPD. I felt a cold jolt go down my spine. Caleb, I said, stay with her. I have to take this. It is the detective. Caleb nodded. He took Lila's hand. I have got her. Go. I stepped out of the bay and walked down the hallway, past the nurse's station, to a quiet alcove near the elevators. This is Ariana. I said, Ms. Ross, this is Detective Miller. I know it is early, but I wanted to catch you before my shift turnover. Is it about the preservation order? I asked. It is, he said. We got the preliminary packet back from the lender's fraud department late last night. They moved fast because of the amount involved. And we have the metadata for the electronic signature. He said, the signature time-stamped May 30th at 10:14 in the morning originated from a desktop computer. The IP address is registered to a residential account with Spectrum Internet. I closed my eyes. I knew what he was going to say, but hearing it made the floor feel tilt under my feet. The subscriber for that account is Gordon Ross, Miller said, and the device ID matches a computer named Gordon Office PC. I let out a long, shaky breath. It wasn't a hacker. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't Ethan on a laptop at a coffee shop. It was my father, sitting at his mahogany desk, logging into a loan portal, and typing my name. This gives us probable cause, Miller continued. It is not a conviction yet, but it is enough to bring him in for questioning. Do you want us to proceed? I looked down the hallway. I could see the waiting room through the glass doors. My parents were sitting there. Gordon was reading a magazine. Marianne was scrolling on her phone. Ethan was pacing. They looked so normal, so respectable. Ms. Ross? Miller asked. Hold on. I said, don't issue the warrant yet. Give me an hour. I hung up. I walked toward the waiting room. I didn't go in. I stood at the door and caught my father's eye. I jerked my head toward the hallway. He frowned, then put down his magazine. He said something to Marianne and walked out to meet me. What is it? He asked. Is there news? Did something go wrong? Walk with me. I said. I led him away from the waiting room, away from the pre-op bays, to the far end of the corridor where a large window overlooked the parking lot. The sun was fully up now, casting harsh, revealing shadows. I stopped and turned to face him. Detective Miller just called me. I said. Gordon's face didn't change, but his eyes went still. And? He asked. His voice was casual, too casual. He has the metadata from the lender. I said, the electronic signature didn't come from a phone. It came from a desktop computer. Specifically, the one in your office, the one named Gordon Office PC. Gordon didn't blink. He stared at me, and for a moment, I saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. He was looking for an exit. He was looking for a spin. I know it was you. Dad, I said, I know you sat at your desk and forged my name. I know you did it because the trust money was gone and you needed to keep Ethan's house of cards from falling down. Gordon looked out the window. He put his hands in his pockets. You don't understand the pressure. Ariana, he said quietly, I don't care about the pressure. I said, Ethan was suicidal. He said, he turned to look at me, and his eyes were wet. 2 years ago, after the lawsuit, he sat in the living room with a bottle of pills and told me he was a failure. He told me he had nothing. I promised him I would fix it. I promised him I would help him build something of his own. So you bought him a boat. I said, I bought him hope, Gordon said, his voice cracking. I was trying to save my son's life. And you decided the cost of saving him was my daughter's health? I asked. No, he said, shaking his head. No, it was never a choice. I thought the insurance would pay. I thought I could juggle the payments. I thought you would understand. Eventually, if I just got the loan through, Ethan would have the business, and then we could pay for the surgery later. I was trying to keep everyone afloat. I stepped closer to him. I looked at this man who had raised me, who had taught me to ride a bike, who had walked me down the aisle. I saw a man who was so terrified of his son's failure that he was willing to cannibalize his daughter to prevent it. "You were trying to keep him afloat," I said, my voice trembling with a rage so cold it burned. "But you tried to do it with my child's body as the ballast." Gordon flinched as if I had slapped him. "You treated her surgery as a line item you could delete," I said. "You treated my credit as a resource you could strip mine. You didn't save Ethan. Dad, you just taught him that it is okay to steal from family as long as you call it an investment." Ariana. He reached out a hand. "Don't," I said. I stepped back. "Here's the deal. Gordon, I have the police report number. Miller is ready to issue a warrant. He has the IP address. It is a felony. You will go to jail." Gordon's face went gray. "But I am tired." I said, "I am tired of fighting you. So I am giving you one option. You are going to walk into that waiting room. You are going to tell Ethan that the loan is dead. You are going to call the lender yourself and confess that you signed it without my authorization. You are going to take the full liability, and if I don't," he whispered, "then I hand over everything." I said, "The trust documents from Aunt Lorna, the bank records, the text messages. I will give Miller the green light to arrest you at your house, and I will make sure every person at Stonebrook Church knows exactly why." He stared at me. He looked for the little girl who used to seek his approval. He didn't find her. "You would really do that?" he asked. "You would destroy the family? You already destroyed it." I said, "I am just signing the death certificate." We stood there for a long moment. The hospital PA system chimed. "Doctor, Patel to oncology. Doctor, Patel to oncology." "Okay," Gordon said. His shoulders slumped. "Okay." He turned to walk back to the waiting room. Marianne was standing 10 feet away. She had followed us. She had heard the end. She looked at Gordon. Then she looked at me. Her face was twisted with a mixture of fear and loathing. "You are cruel, Ariana," she spat. "You are a cruel, ungrateful girl. Your father is trying to hold everything together, and you are holding a knife to his throat." I looked at my mother. I felt nothing. No guilt, no desire to explain. "Today is Lila's day." I said simply, "We can discuss your feelings after my daughter wakes up." I walked past them. I walked back to the pre-op bay. I got there just as the orderlies were unlocking the wheels of Lila's bed. "Doctor," Evans was at the head of the bed. "We are rolling." "Mom," he said, "give her a kiss." I leaned down. Lila looked tiny in the white sheets. She was already groggy from the medication. "I love you, baby," I whispered. "I will be right here when you wake up. Love you. Mommy." She mumbled. They wheeled her out. I watched the bed disappear through the double doors marked sterile area. No entry. Then, silence. The next 6 hours were an exercise in endurance. I went to the waiting room. I didn't sit with my parents. Caleb and I sat on one side of the room, near the window. Aunt Lorna arrived 20 minutes later, carrying a large tote bag and 3 coffees. She sat with us. She didn't say a word to Gordon or Marianne. She just handed me a coffee and put her hand on my knee. Gordon and Marianne sat on the other side of the room. They whispered to each other. Ethan paced for an hour, then stormed out, his phone pressed to his ear, shouting something about unbelievable betrayal. He didn't come back. Gordon sat with his head in his hands. He looked like a man waiting for a verdict. In a way, he was... Time stretched. Every minute felt like an hour. I watched the clock. 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, noon. I tried to read a magazine, but the words swam. I tried to check my email, but I couldn't focus. Caleb was a rock. He didn't try to distract me. He just sat there, his shoulder touching mine, a physical reminder that I wasn't doing this alone. At 1:30 in the afternoon, the double doors opened. Doctor. Evans walked out. He was still wearing his surgical cap, but he had taken off his mask. He looked tired but relaxed. "Mrs. Ross? Mr. Morrow?" We stood up. My knees felt like water. "She did great." "Doctor," Evans said. I let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. The fusion went perfectly. He said, "We achieved a significant correction on the curvature. The nerves were compressed, as we suspected, but they look healthy. I expect a full recovery of sensation, though it will take time and physical therapy." "She is okay?" Caleb asked, his voice thick. "She is stable and waking up in the PACU. Doctor," Evans said, "you can see her in about 30 minutes. Thank you." I wept. "Thank you." Behind us, I heard movement. Gordon and Marianne stepped forward. They had composed themselves. Marianne was dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. Gordon stood tall, trying to reclaim his patriarchal stature. "Thank the Lord," Marianne said, moving toward the doctor. "Doctor, we are the grandparents. When can we—" I stepped in front of them, gently but firmly. I turned my back to them and spoke to Dr. Evans. "Doctor," I said, "the visitation list is restricted to parents only for the first 24 hours. Please make sure the nurses know." Doctor Evans looked at the tension in my posture. He was a smart man. He nodded. "Understood. Miss Ross, parents only." He walked away. I turned to my parents. "You heard him." I said. Marianne gasped. "Ariana, you cannot keep us from her. We have been sitting here for 6 hours. You can go home." "Mom," I said, "I will text you an update later. But Gordon," she looked at my father. "Do something." Gordon looked at me. He saw the resolve in my face. He saw the wreckage of the morning. He knew he had no chips left to play. "Let's go." "Marianne," he said quietly. "What?" she asked. "We are leaving," he said. He took her arm. "We are going home." He led her away. She looked back at me, bewildered and angry. But she went. I watched them get on the elevator. The doors closed. Cutting them off from my view, I took a deep breath. The air tasted cleaner. "We are ready for you." A nurse called from the doorway. I walked into the recovery room. Lila was lying in a bed surrounded by machines. Her face was pale, and there were tubes, but she was breathing on her own. Her eyes fluttered open as I approached. "Mommy?" she croaked. "I am here, baby," I said. I brushed the hair off her forehead. "I am right here." "Did they fix it?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "They fixed it." She closed her eyes again. "Good." I stood there for a long time, listening to the steady beep of the heart monitor. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Caleb stood on the other side of the bed. He reached across and took my hand. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. We were parents, united by the terrifying, wonderful duty of keeping a small human alive. Later that evening, when Lila was settled in her room and sleeping soundly, I walked down to the hospital cafeteria to get a cup of tea. I sat at a small table by the window, looking out at the city lights of Harbor Ridge. My phone buzzed. It was an email notification. From Bayview Lending Services. Subject, Loan Application Update. I opened it. "Dear Ms. Ross, per the request of the primary applicant, Gordon Ross, the application for the secured asset loan has been withdrawn. The file has been closed." I lowered the phone. He had done it. He had killed the loan. The boat was gone. The investment was gone. Ethan's dream was dead. I felt a twinge of sadness, but it was distant, like a memory of a pain I used to have. I wasn't the daughter who kept the peace anymore. I wasn't the safety net. I was the wall. I sipped my tea. It was lukewarm, but it warmed me. I didn't know what the future looked like. I didn't know if my parents would ever speak to me again without venom. I didn't know if Ethan would ever grow up. I didn't know how I would pay back Caleb, or how I would rebuild the relationship with my family, or if I even wanted to. But I knew one thing. I looked up at the reflection in the dark window. I saw a woman with tired eyes and messy hair. A woman in a wrinkled navy dress. I saw a mother, and she was enough. Thank you so much for journeying with me through Ariana's story. Writing this piece was an emotional ride, tapping into that specific, visceral fear that comes when you have to choose between the family you were born into and the family you are raising. I hope the ending felt earned to you. I believe that sometimes, the best revenge isn't about destroying the other person, It's about refusing to let them destroy you. It's about drawing a line in the sand and saying, "No further." I would love to hear your thoughts. Where are you listening from today? Have you ever had to draw a hard boundary with a family member to protect your peace or your children? Please leave a comment below. I read them all. And if you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice, resilience, and the complicated, messy truth of human relationships. Until next time, take care of yourselves.